All right, here we go. Welcome to what person-centered supervision is and what person-centered supervision is not. Now, I realize I'm talking to a very narrow niche here, a very narrow slice of people. And you know what? That's okay, because even if you are not a supervisor, you might be curious about theories in general for supervision. The thing is, supervision is its own intervention. It's going to use the same terms, of course, because they're related. But in supervision, you take on different roles. I just look like I was putting on a hat, right? I'm putting on the hat of a teacher, or I might put on the hat of a counselor, or I might put on the hat of a consultant, or even a coach. You know, we also talk about levels. So you have a beginning supervisee, you have a middle stage supervisee, and then you have this supervisee that's about to become your colleague. And so with the developmental models, we just kind of refer to them as level 1, level 2, level 3. So you can imagine how different this is from counseling, right? Because if your person that you're counseling comes in to see you today, as they will come to see me in about an hour, I'll start my counseling day. You know, I'm going to meet them where they are. If they are in a space where they are rocking that treatment plan and they are goal focused and they know exactly what they want to do, and I'm just there to kind of observe the magic, wonderful. If they're not, and we end up talking about something that happened this week, or perhaps they are just in a space where they are not able to really work on anything, I'm going to stay right with them. So the difference between supervising and counseling is this goal-oriented thing with supervision, because supervision, I have one goal, and that is to get them to a fully licensed professional. That's my goal. Hopefully that's their goal. Hopefully we're meeting and we're doing this thing together. But there's a hierarchy in supervision where sometimes we're not on the same page. You know, sometimes maybe my head's not in the right place or their head's not in the right place. And so my stance is much more assertive. My stance is a much more goal-directed one. And lucky for us, supervision has theories and it has particular interventions to get your supervisee to where they need to be. Now, that's language I would never use in counseling, right? Like, okay, I'm going to be a counselor and get my person to where they need to be. Who am I to say where they need to be, right? That's the whole beauty of being a counselor. It's the I-thou relationship. It's the one down. And that's what we're going to talk about today with person-centered supervision, because there are elements of the counseling person-centered that we will bring into the supervision person-centered. But for supervisors, we can never, ever forget that we're gatekeepers. We're always going to be in a one-up position. We are always going to be aware of that hierarchy. And, you know, I've had a lot of person-centered folks come through my 40-hour supervisor training to become an LPC or an LMFT supervisor in Texas. And I think they struggle with this idea of gatekeeper, an evaluator. And we talk about the core structure, right? The contract, orientation, evaluation, remediation, this core framework of helping our supervisees get from point A to point D, right? Whatever that is. But it's full licensure for the sake of our purposes today, right? Or if you're in another state and you're listening to me, and you have been elected or nominated or hired as supervisor for a mental health professional in training, right? You hope that your goal is their goal. You hope that both of you are working together to meet the goal of becoming fully licensed in your field. And if it's not, you still must be the gatekeeper. You must be the evaluator. You must be the remediator. And ultimately, you're the one who signs off on whether or not this person is capable to practice, if they have met the criteria to become a fully licensed mental health professional. And if you're listening to me and you are maybe have a different career than counseling, you may find a few nuggets here as well. So I'm going to go over what person-centered counseling is, what person-centered supervision is, and then you're going to get some examples of what person-centered supervision might sound like and the circumstances in which you might use it, okay? And as always, if you're watching me on a replay, you're amazing. You're watching me on a replay. That means you're taking time out of your day to hit play and learn some new stuff. If you're listening to me on the podcast, same thing. Good job on that treadmill. Good job driving those kids around. Good job on that walk today. You're learning new stuff to become a better supervisor because we have one goal, and that is to fill the gaps in access to care in mental health services in rural and underserved Texas. More supervisors means more care, more access. So go you. All right. And also, I'm going to be referring to screen shares. So I will talk you through it as I'm going through it. So here go the glasses. Let's talk about person-centered supervision. So person-centered counseling. I'm going to read from a slide. So this is very, very academic. No, it's not. This doesn't even sound academic. This is literally just bullet points. So here I go. Key concepts, the supervisee, or I'll edit this out of the podcast. Long pause. Hang on. So the key idea with person-centered counseling is that your client has immense resources. You, the counselor, are not viewed as the expert. Your client is taking an active role in the process, a collaborator, and the quality of the counseling depends on the relationship. Person-centered is all about relationship. Your role as a counselor doing person-centered counseling is to provide that atmosphere of empathy and warmth and genuineness and unconditional positive regard. You're going to facilitate your client's ability to be open to their experience so they can become fully present and engaged in the relationship, and you trust your client's ability to grow. Well, if I just plug in the word supervisor, it's pretty much the same for supervision. The supervisee has immense resources. You believe that you are not the expert. Your supervisee is expected to take an active role in the process as collaborator. The quality of supervision hinges on that relationship. Your job as a person-centered supervisor is to provide an atmosphere of empathy, warmth, and unconditional positive regard. You facilitate your supervisee's ability to be open to their experience so they can become fully engaged in the relationship, and you trust the supervisee's potential for growth. Now, if I am counseling someone and I'm doing person-centered counseling, there are a few key elements. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and just show you a couple of common, actually one's more common than the other, evaluation instruments. So I'm going to share the screen and show you the CCSR that was developed and created by Dr. Lambie. And you can see this is just a very basic. We use it with our intern students at university. We use it. I hope a lot of you use it with your associates, postgraduate who are working on their hours toward licensure. And you can see that person-centered, and that's very small, isn't it? All right, if you're listening to me, I'm now screen sharing the CCSR, and you can Google that, CCSR by Glenn Lambie, and there are lots of PDFs online where you can find and even follow along with me if you want to hit pause and follow along. So you'll see down here, I'm pointing at the bottom three elements: reflecting, paraphrasing, reflecting feelings, and reflecting, summarizing. This is a basic tenet of person-centered counseling. So you can see on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, let's just look at reflecting, paraphrasing. The student or the supervisee demonstrates appropriate use of paraphrasing as a primary therapeutic approach. That's awesome. Harmful or very poor, the supervisee demonstrates poor ability to paraphrase, such as being judgmental or dismissive. So if I'm supervising and I'm teaching my supervisee to do or be person-centered, then I'm going to pay attention to these things. And these things are actually core, fundamental, key elements to what we do in counseling. So if you're a non-counselor and you're listening to this podcast or this training or watching it on YouTube, here's a little peek behind the curtain. This is a huge fundamental part of what we as counselors do to help our clients feel better, accomplish their goals, make their way through our treatment plans. The next part is reflecting of feelings. So a level, 5, which is the best on this instrument. Your supervisee or your counselor is demonstrating appropriate use of reflection of feeling as a primary approach. And I'll just keep going, reflecting or summarizing. 5 out of 5 demonstrates consistent ability to use summarization to include content, feelings, behaviors, and future plans. So if you are going to teach your supervisee or a student how to be person-centered, to reflect content, reflect meaning, to summarize back to the client, then this would be a great instrument. You could make sure they were doing those things. I'm going to show you another instrument. This is not quite as common. It's called the Kharkov scale, and you can see this is, let me make that go away. So what I'm looking at is actually a PDF. I don't know if you can find this one. It's spelled Karkhuff, and it also helps supervisors, professors teach person-centered supervision. So there's a level 1, there's a level 2, level 3, and level 4 and level 5. So when I was learning how to supervise in my doctoral program, we were learning how to find level 5 Kharkov interventions in our internship students. So we were grading them on their ability to deliver a level 5 Kharkov. So let's see, here's an example. It seems that your present situation is really of long standing and goes back a long series of difficulties in your developmental process compared to, although you say you don't know what's wrong, and although you say your parents like you, they never seem to have given any specific evidence of love or affection. So you can see, if you're a supervisor or a professor who has taught this before, those two statements are different because they have different levels of extending that content and meaning, extending that reflection and that summary. Okay, so here we go. That was person-centered counseling, teaching person-centered concepts. Now we're going to switch it to, hey, that's what the title of this podcast or this training is, right? How to do person-centered supervision. So I'm going to stop the screen share. And now let's talk about why, how, and what this would look like. So if I'm a supervisor and I have my supervisee in front of me, let's say they are a level 1 brand new supervisee, and they are coming to me and they're anxious and they just want to do well, and they don't want to talk about any of their faults or problems or mistakes. And I'm just going to look at them and I'm going to nod. I'm going to lean forward and I am going to engage person-centered supervision. And I might say, you seem really anxious today. It sounds like You're really wanting to do well for me. It sounds like you're wanting to do so well, you may even be hesitant to share your problems or struggles with me. Okay, so in that moment, as I'm doing person-centered supervision, you hear that I'm not asking many questions. I'm doing a lot of reflecting, right? And so with a level 1 supervisee, I'm putting on that hat of counselor. I'm creating this huge, beautiful, open space for my supervisee to process, right? I'm not going to hammer them with Socratic questions. I'm not going to come at them with an agenda saying, okay, we can only talk about this for 5 minutes and then we got to get to this other thing. And those are all wonderful things if you're doing CBT supervision, right? You got some stuff you got to get through and okay. When you decide to deploy person-centered theory and person-centered interventions start coming out of your mouth, you are creating that safe space where the relationship takes priority over everything. That doesn't mean you're not a gatekeeper anymore. That doesn't mean you're not gonna intervene immediately if your supervisee has done something wrong. What this means is for this moment, you have your counselor hat on and you're creating this space where your supervisee can breathe and take their time and share with you openly and honestly. And you're going to sit back and you're going to notice your feelings. You're going to notice all of the things you want to say. You're never going to check out of that role of gatekeeper. And you will stay in this role as long as you need to until that supervisee gets to where, here's where the hierarchy comes in, when they get to where you need them to be. Now, if they can't get to where you need them to be, in other words, you cannot wear that counselor hat every hour of every supervision session every day. I mean, if they're coming in over and over and over and over again, and you're like, whoop, here goes that counselor hat again. Boy, that counselor hat's getting a little worn out. There's a problem. And that's why we teach the core structure, contract, orientation, evaluation, remediation. You must have some evaluations in place so that you can help your supervisee understand exactly how they're struggling in an observable, measurable, trackable way. And if they can't make progress, this is why the remediation plan is now happening. And you can even see when we teach person-centered counseling to our students, we have to have an evaluation, right? We have to establish and recognize that there is a hierarchy there. So it's a moment, it's a hat, it's for particular situations. Another great situation to deploy person-centered supervision is when your supervisee isn't recognizing their countertransference. They may come in and be like, oh my gosh, that parent cornered me in the hallway again. I cannot stand this person. Or, I really understand why this kid is running away from home. Or, gosh, you know what? If my mom was like that, I would be failing all my assignments too, right? You're the supervisor. You're listening for that stuff, right? And if, we tend to match or mirror anxiety in the moment. And if you're the supervisor, you're breathing. You're saying, ooh, this sounds like a really good place to deploy my person-centered supervision theory. I'm going to give you some examples of some things you can say in that moment. I'm going to turn this way, put the glasses on, because I'm going to read off of a slide. Here I go. Person-centered supervision sample questions. Number 1. I'd like to hear you talk more about how it was for you to be with the client for that session. I encourage you to begin to trust more your own internal direction. Even though you're saying you really don't know how to proceed, if you did know, what actions might you take? So there are a couple of questions in here, right? Tell me what you found to be important about the experience you shared with your client today. I'd like to hear you talk more about the climate you're creating with your clients. To what degree do you feel you understand the world of your client? What are your expectations for what we might do in today's supervision session? And so in that moment, your person-centered supervision, you're not just reflecting content, you're not just reflecting feelings, you're not just extending and summarizing. You are being very, very strategic because remember, as the person-centered supervisor, you are getting your supervisees to a space where they can accomplish their goal, which we should all know is becoming a competent, fully licensed professional. So we will make sure we equip them to pass their next evaluation, to make sure that they don't need remediation the best we can. And if that means putting on that counselor hat, deploying some person-centered supervision, then excellent. Supervisor, you've got this. You're doing a wonderful job of helping your supervisee feel that safe space in that relationship. You are the keeper of the relationship, but you're also the gatekeeper. And so if you notice this happens supervision after supervision after supervision, and you've deployed a few evaluations and they're not quite meeting expectations, it's time to do something different. If that's an evaluation, if that's a remediation, if that's hitting pause on supervision and counseling completely, that's up to you, right? You just can't forget, ultimately, that's your job, supervisor. All of these theories, and don't forget to check out the podcast episode where I talk about how to do CBT supervision, and you're going to hear how different that sounds because of the different role, right? CBT, you got your teacher hat on, you're teaching, you're reteaching, something is going on that you've got to get through it. This is definitely a pause button where you're paying attention to something. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, for listening, if you're listening on a replay.